Not a matter of if but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we dig into hot topics with people on the inside. Attorney Urs Furrer counsels clients in the petroleum industry. He handles franchise disputes and cleanup issues that happen at service stations, terminals, and pipelines. Let's face it, oil is a hot topic. And with the U.S. movement in Iran and Iran's retaliation, oil is in the headlines. And at most times, oil is a hot topic for environmentalists and politicians. Urs takes us inside his world in the case file I call Landman Next Door. Urs, oil has a lot of layers. As a baseline, what would you like us to know?
I would say there's two things. First, the modern world does not exist without oil and natural gas. And both of those equal prosperity. There is nowhere in the world where oil and gas are available at reasonable prices that prosperity exists. And what people forget is that there's about 6,000 products. Everything we use every day, all day long, comes from oil. Whether it's golf balls, deodorant, hair coloring, hair colors, toothbrush, toothpaste, pharmaceuticals, phones, none of it can be made without oil.
So the list that you say there really hits close to home. I mean, I just brushed my teeth this morning, got my hair touched up last week. I mean, all of these things are happening because of oil producers.
Soap, shampoo, shaving cream, everything you need to not live like it's the 15th century comes from oil.
So why is it so controversial? Why, when you talk about oil, when you talk about digging, the environmentalists just go bonkers? And I mean, on a certain level, hopefully all of us want to protect the environment.
Oh, of course. Look, I mean, the industry, the oil industry, for example, spends, millions and millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, on improving its environmental stewardship, cleaning up spills when they happen. And, all those companies, and this is something that people forget all the time, those companies are made up of your neighbors, right? I've worked in the industry for 35 years. They're some of the most caring people that you know. They're people I would call friends. Some of them were at my wedding, in the past. The reality is they care about the environment too. And nobody has, no one has the corner on the market for caring for the environment that we live in.
So, Urs, what can you tell us about the actual production of oil? How has it gotten more environmentally friendly over the years? And what are some of the things that the industry is doing on a regular basis to respond to some of those concerns?
Well, I don't work on the upstream side. The upstream is where the oil is taken out of the ground before it's sent to the refinery. But all of the companies that do drilling, first of all, there's strict laws in every state and right in the country, and federal laws regarding the drilling, environmental laws that they have to comply with. But they, spilled oil is lost money. So there's an interest in, one, not losing any fuel, right? Because fuel that gets spilled, you don't get to sell. And two, you're going to have to clean it up. And remediating oil, while practical, is still expensive. I mean, the industry's gotten much better at remediating, oil spills, gasoline spills than it was, let's say, 30, 40 years ago. But it still costs a lot of money to do that. And they have an interest in not allowing that to happen.
Spills as well as fatalities, right, on their own properties and their sites and all the way both upstream. I mean, it's definitely in that upstream part of things.
Oh, absolutely. Even whether it's upstream, right, where they're drilling, or downstream where they're selling. Everywhere you go, if you're working for a company in the industry, all of them have, very strict rules that they need to follow. Everybody who's involved in, let's say, a remediation project has to follow safety protocols. I've been on sites where they're doing those remediations, and every day starts with, here's how we're going to stay safe today.
A modern show that has brought the oil industry to the masses is called Landman, and I know you and I both watched it. You're a fan. I'm a fan. For those who don't know, it stars Billy Bob Thornton. It's a great show because it teaches us about the industry. It also has a lot of amazing human dynamics going on, some terrific acting from both big stars and new stars. But it's brought the topic and maybe some new education to the forefront.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I love the show, and I know I'm not alone in that. And I think the important part is to realize, like I said before, is that these are regular people who go home to their families at night, right? They've got children, they've got all the same problems and that everybody else has, and they're trying to do a job. And what's often left out in the debate on oil, especially with, like, we've talked about this before, groups like just stop oil or stop oil now. I mean, really, that's just a naive statement by people who have no idea what they're talking about, right? Because we're not, unless everybody wants to go back to 150 years before oil. Let's compare the world then as it is compared today.
Yeah, like
right?
some of
Just
the days of Yellowstone, when I think of in the precursors to the series Yellowstone, where we're in
1883. What's the difference, right? There's no phones, right? There's no cars. For heat, people burn wood inside your house. It's terrible from a health perspective, right? They burned coal in England until they had oil, and the life expectancies across the world, everywhere, increased dramatically once oil and natural gas were, they had seen, we knew about them, but once we figured out what we could do with them, right, when they were refined and broken up into all the products that we were talking about before, that's when the real modern world began. Right now, everybody, like in America, and most places around the world, of course, there's energy poverty everywhere. In what we call third world countries. And those people are poor largely because they have no access to reliable energy.
Yeah, and I like to call those nations the developing world. And you and I have talked in the past, probably to get conservation to the levels that some environmentalists want, either quote unquote developed nations need to give up a lot, or we're going to ask developing nations not to improve some of their lifestyle conditions, which, as you've mentioned, is probably an impossible ask.
Well, nobody's going to give up. No one's voluntarily giving up their cell phone, soap, shampoo, but you're going to ask, I mean, if you think about it, if we gave up oil, right, there's no bags that are going to hold saline and medications next to you when you're in the hospital. You can't build, a pacemaker. You can't put in stents. None of those things exist without oil.
So
oil has to come out of the ground and then be refined to make all those products. But none of those products existed before we had oil.
So a group that you mentioned, Stop Oil Now, out of England, I know you've said they are uneducated on the topic. When you talk about these very real things, surgeries, dental appointments, all of those things, toothbrushes, what is their reaction? I mean, what is their alternative or their substitute to how those products and surgeries then happen?
Well, admittedly, I've never met anybody from or had a specific conversation with anybody from Stop Oil Now. But there is not a conversation to be had unless you're willing to really go back to how we lived when humans were primitive. Now, if you read some of the, let's say, more dramatic or more staunch environmental, books that have been written in the past, you'll see that there is what I believe is essentially an anti-human outlook. That is that the earth was better off before mankind. And I do believe that a significant portion of the Stop Oil Now people believe that. Now, do they all believe it? No. Are a lot of them naive? Yes. Do they know that all these products can only be made without oil? Assuredly not. But, you know, they get on the news, and the news tends to skew, against big companies and against big oil. And they kind of skip over the fact that we wouldn't have televisions if it weren't for oil. And, they wouldn't be driving in their limos to get to the studio to do their morning talk show or evening talk show. So that kind of gets left out. And so most people take it for granted that we have everything that we have around us, but they don't really understand, I don't think, how essential oil is to day-to-day life.
And we know, because in the world we're living in spring of 2026, with the U.S. having bombed Iran and the Middle East is in turmoil, in war, oil is a hot topic. What's the reality check, Urs, on oil pricing? Because we're hearing a lot about, everybody's watching, what's the barrel now? Is it going up? Is it going down? What is that level of a barrel of oil that then translates into people in the U.S. and other parts of the world actually paying more or paying a decent amount for a gallon of gas?
Well, again, it's not something I do on a day-to-day basis in my practice. I'm not involved in, I don't trade in oil. Okay. But everybody needs, right? Everyone with a car is going to need gas. If you ride a bus that's not electric, you need gas. If you ride a bus that's electric, you get electricity, but that usually comes either from natural gas or coal, largely, or at least, 2/3. So to some extent, everybody's impacted by those prices. We could do a whole nother show on what's the trade-off with, the current Iranian regime versus the increase in prices that we've seen. If I was predicting them, I would think they'll stay raised for a while before they go back down. But some people that I've spoken to or things that I've read would say that the price before the war started included a premium that was based on the possibility any day of the week that the Iranian regime, could slow or halt traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. If that changes, prices may go lower than they were before.
Okay, thank you for that education on it. The other piece that I want to ask you about, we hear a lot about the United States is not oil dependent. We produce enough. By we, because I'm an American citizen, I say the U.S. produces enough for United States, the people in the United States. What does that mean? And if that's the case, why are we so concerned, and why are prices going up on other products?
Well, twofold, or maybe it's more than that. Oil is a commodity, is traded across the world, right? And it's gallon for gallon or barrel for barrel, it's traded. And wherever it comes from, with the exception of certain needs, like certain refineries need what's called heavy crude or sour crude. Other refineries are built for light crude, right? So it depends. So Venezuelan oil is better for Gulf refineries, but other refineries that we have in the United States are better for oil that comes from the Permian Basin, let's say. So, but it's traded as a commodity, so it trades with basically two prices. There's West Texas and Brent. Those are trading oil for oil. Now, is it theoretically possible that we stopped all, exports? I know one thing. California gets now between 60 and 70% of its oil from overseas because they've put so much regulatory pressure on the refineries that the refineries are closing down. They may have more oil in California than they do in Texas. They just don't want to drill for it.
The regulatory restrictions are on U.S. producers, is what you're saying.
Only on California refineries, because these are state laws, right? California, unlike Texas, is hostile to its refineries. Hence, some of them are leaving. Multiple refineries have been closing over the last couple of years. And they still use the same amount of oil, but now they get it from elsewhere. And they get it from, California gets oil that comes all the way from Iraq. I know the idea is that it's going to be better for the environment, except for California and the U.S. laws are a lot stricter regarding environmental regulations.
Well,
than
I also think
Iraq's
about
are.
shipping all the way across
Plus the shipping.
the waters.
Plus the shipping, and the
all
shipping is not electric, right? It's maritime, right? It's bunker fuel.
All the rules.
So
and if a war is going on, there's so many layers. Well,
none of it makes any sense.
We could definitely do so many more episodes on the offshoots of this topic, Urs. Leave us with this, though. What can a regular person do to understand the headlines? And I know you're not always a fan of traditional media and how oil gets covered, but what can we do to be more discerning?
Oh, I guess for one thing is to look elsewhere to get your news, or at least to do some independent research. But have an open mind and ask questions. Don't rely just on the legacy media. And I'm not. It's everybody. Whether it's because it's oil or because it's big companies or whatever. But no, when people protest against oil companies or protest against oil, let's talk about what the alternative actually is. Just as a quick example, I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll just tell you this: the idea or the proposition that renewables are going to replace oil is a complete fallacy, technically and scientifically impossible, because electricity, to convert everything to electricity, solar and wind give us one thing, and that's electricity. But solar panels and windmills can't be built without oil. Leaving aside the fact that solar panels don't do anything at night, they don't do anything when they're covered with pollen, they don't do anything when they're covered with snow, and windmills don't work when there's no wind. All they make is electricity. But electricity isn't going to make detergent, it's not going to make shampoo, it's not going to make aspirin, it's not going to make, rubbing alcohol, and it's not going to make stents for your heart. Right.
Urs, thank you.
Anything else.
Thank you for being our landman next door. You've given us a lot to think about, for sure. I would love politicians to think and legislators to think about how they are legislating around these different issues. The alternative sources, the oil sources. I, for one, would love for the United States to become independent in our need, at least here, and then maybe we have closer to home markets where we could sell our oil. We'll get into that with you. We'll have you back. Connect with Urs at his firm's website, hflawllp.com. This episode is powered by Mall of America. Mall of America. Great shopping. A dazzling and dizzying variety of attractions and restaurants. Did you realize Mall of America also hosts hundreds of events each year? Everything from high-fashion runway shows to visits from the hottest musicians, pop-up celebrations ahead of movie premieres, charity-related walks, and holiday-themed experiences. You never know what you will find at our mall. For upcoming events and happenings, check out mallofamerica.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and X at The Crisis Files. Visit thecrisisfiles.com for all 4 seasons of the show. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.